Recently, there has been a lot of misinformation floating around about the scale of Hyperman from the Verse and Dimensions wiki. Some think he is hyperversal, some are scaling him way into boundless. And some think he only scales to universal plus. Today I want to clear up some of those misconceptions. First of all, some people are going to argue that any points I will make here are invalid, because Hyperman is a victim of the OC fallacy. I have to strongly disagree with that. Now, what even is the OC fallacy? The OC fallacy is when a character is considered as an OC and is therefore exempt from power scaling altogether. To explain it better, I would like to bring up two examples. First is the anti-principle. Anti-principle was debunked to non-existence, as every feat it supposedly had was irrelevant, as anti-principle had no verse and so its feats, no matter how grand they sounded, were completely meaningless. A second example would be, if I made up a story that takes place in the Marvel universe and make my character beat the one above all. Those feats would not be legitimate, as Marvel is not a collaborative writing project and therefore my character is not part of Marvel and also has no verse. Those two would not apply to Hyperman. Verse and Dimensions is a collaborative project, similar to SCP, and therefore every character added to the verse is part of a loose canon, similar to the SCP verse. And the first example would also not apply to Hyperman, since Verse and Dimensions is known for having many different types of verses, each interacting in some way with the other verses. And since Hyperman scales off these established verses, he is not verseless like Anti-Principle or other OCs. There is also the argument that Hyperman should be considered an OC, because Verse and Dimensions is an unpublished work. To that I say, that many other works of fiction that are frequently used in power scaling, like I Can Tell You What's Killing the Stars or the SCP Foundation, are also not officially published. The SCP Wiki also has the same license as Verse and Dimensions. Some people are also saying that fandom wikis like Verse and Dimensions are too easy to edit by people and therefore are too inconsistent. That is technically the case, but Verse and Dimensions wiki has a very good team of admins and moderators, and nonsense edits to articles are very quickly removed again. I am not saying that Verse and Dimensions doesn't change at all. The power scale of multiple characters has changed on many occasions. But that alone does not qualify a verse or character for OC fallacy. It's just retconning, and basically every major verse has done that before. Now that I have debunked the argument that Verse and Dimensions should not be power scaled, let us now start with scaling Hyperman. For that, we need to determine the scale of Verse and Dimensions cosmology, at least to the point that Hyperman scales to. The base of the cosmology is a universe. The universes inside the omniverse vary in almost anything. Be it physics, events, or even dimensionality. The highest number of dimensions a universe can reach is Aleph-1 dimensions. Meaning that in some parts of the omniverse, the lowest structure can already be scaled to low outerversal. A universe is the lowest verse within the archverse chain and has a sup count index of 1. Next up is the multiverse, which can contain up to an infinite amount of universes and has a sup count index of 2. Sup count works in the way that each sup count verse contains an infinite amount of verses with a sup count smaller than it. The multiverse is contained by the megaverse with a sup count index of 3. This hierarchy, which goes on infinitely, is called the archverse chain. The omniverse is the archverse with the sup count index of omega. Meaning that the omniverse contains all archverses with a finite index. You could think that this would scale the omniverse to baseline outerverse level, but that is not the case. The stacks of archverses are only Aleph 0 high, but to reach the next cardinal we would need a stack of archverses that is also Aleph 1 high. Therefore the omniverse only scales one layer into low outerversal. Now we get to the scaling of Hyperman. Hyperman is able to hold dominion over all of the omniverse and transcend it. He was also able to create his own Godverse, which should be equal to the omniverse. Hyperman is also stated to be comparable to the Destroyer, who is comparable to the Creator who created the entire omniverse. Therefore Hyperman scales one layer into low outer versal. The verse and dimensions wiki doesn't stop there, however. There are many more verses with characters that scale even higher than Hyperman. In the next video I will explore these unknown regions of verse and dimensions and argue that verse and dimensions as a whole can be considered one of the most powerful verses.